At LAX airport, a security guard spotted what the X-ray machines had missed. Federal agents had been searching for 3 hours but found nothing. 67-year-old Harold understood what was happening with just one glance, because he had been seeing these things for 30 years. Life's greatest lessons come from the most unexpected people. In this video, you'll watch how an airport security guard detected a threat in a single glance that the FBI couldn't find in 3 hours. Harold's story, at 67 years old, is about the power of experience and how deceptive prejudices can be. Harold Mitchell wakes up at 4:30 a.m. every morning. The sound of the coffee machine is the only noise in his bedroom. His small apartment in Inglewood is just 10 minutes from LAX airport. The rent is $1,200, taking almost half of his retirement pension. The walls are bare except for a single framed photograph. Young soldiers standing in front of a military base, dated 1978. Harold is third from the left, 25 years old, wearing a military intelligence uniform. Back then, he believed he could change the world. Now, 67 years old, Harold understands life's irony. People with the most important talents are often the most invisible. For the past 5 years, Harold has worked the morning shift at Terminal 3. Blue uniform, security badge, and a quiet demeanor that makes passengers barely notice him. He checks bags, operates the X-ray scanner, and directs confused travelers to their gates. His young co-workers call him Uncle Harold, respectful but distant. To the world, he's just another airport employee counting down to retirement. Harold's story begins in 1975, 18 years old, from a small town in Texas. When he joined the Army, Cold War tensions were at their peak. Smart, quick to learn, and gifted with languages, Harold was directed to military intelligence. His first assignment was West Berlin. On the East German border, he worked daily on the fine line between life and death. In the 1980s, he participated in covert operations in the Middle East. In the 1990s, he tracked war criminals in the Balkans. After September 11th, he established intelligence units in Afghanistan and Iraq. Harold's reports went directly to the Pentagon. Presidents made decisions using his analyses, but at 60, retirement came. Suddenly, the man who spoke with foreign generals found himself at home. No mission, no purpose. His wife Margaret tried to cheer him up, but Harold felt lost. Margaret's death from cancer 3 years ago changed everything. Harold was devastated. His military pension couldn't cover the medical debts. He sold the house and moved to a modest apartment in Sierra Vista. He needed to work. He applied for military consultant jobs, translation roles, instructor positions. But the answer was always the same. You're too old. Your certifications aren't current. The market is too competitive. Then one day, he saw a job posting for a security guard at LAX airport. $15 an hour. It wasn't enough, but it was better than nothing. But Harold's eyes never stopped working the way they were trained to work. He notices patterns, behaviors, inconsistencies. How a person's shoulders tense when they lie. How someone's gait changes when they're carrying something they shouldn't. Small details that most people miss, but that once made the difference between life and death in places far from home. The young security guards find Harold odd. Marcus, 24, a UCLA graduate, says, "Good morning, Uncle," to Harold every morning, but never engages in conversation. Jessica, 28, a mother of 2, wonders why Harold still works at his age but doesn't dare ask. Harold feels their silent judgments, but doesn't care. The most important lesson survival teaches is this: what others think doesn't matter. Only doing your job right matters. That Tuesday morning started like any other. He arrived at work at 6 a.m., put on his uniform, checked his equipment. The morning rush had begun at Terminal 3. Business travelers, vacationers, international passengers, each with their own story, their own worries. While Harold was managing Checkpoint B, FBI agent Sarah Chen approached with 2 federal officers. Chen was 35, a Stanford graduate, an agent at the peak of her career. The 2 officers beside her had complete confidence in technology and modern security methods. There was intelligence about a possible threat, someone planning to smuggle explosives onto a flight to New York. They had descriptions, profiles, even partial surveillance footage, but nothing concrete. The suspect was between 30 to 35 years old, wearing business attire, professional looking. Agent Chen set up a temporary command center near Harold's station. Her team monitored every passenger, every bag, every movement. Advanced scanners, chemical detectors, behavioral analysts, full federal response. The latest technology, the best trained personnel, unlimited resources. Harold continued his routine work while watching the operation from the corner of his eye. He knew the federal agents' methods, systematic, technology-focused, detailed. But he also knew their weaknesses. Over-reliance on data, underestimating human intuition, following patterns too rigidly. Passengers lined up, placed their belongings in plastic bins, walked through the metal detector. Standard procedure, nothing unusual. Jessica was working at the neighboring checkpoint. Marcus's shift would end at 9 a.m. By 9:30 a.m., the federal team had taken 5 people for detailed screening. All came out clean. Chen's tension was increasing. The intelligence was reliable, the threat was real, but they couldn't find the target. Until 11:47 a.m. A man in his 30s approached Harold's checkpoint. Well-dressed, navy blue suit, white shirt, blue tie. His business attire was perfectly coordinated, his shoes polished, his overall appearance professional and trustworthy. He placed his laptop bag and shoes in the bins, walked through the metal detector. Clean. No alarms. The man was smiling, calm and confident. He fit the FBI profile perfectly, but triggered no alerts. But Harold's attention caught on something else. The man's carry-on bag showed a standard laptop, some clothes, and travel documents as it passed through the X-ray machine. Nothing suspicious on the screen. Chen's team was also monitoring the screen, technicians checking every detail. But Harold had seen this pattern before. Not the items themselves, but how they were arranged. Precise positioning, careful spacing, too intentional, too perfect. As if someone had practiced packing that bag multiple times. He had seen something similar in Beirut in 1987, another variation in Bosnia in 1995, a more sophisticated version in Baghdad in 2003. Every time the same principles, perfect appearance, calculated placement, defeating security systems that relied on technology. Harold stopped the conveyor belt. "Sir," he called to the passenger, keeping his voice low, "could you step aside for a moment?" The man's smile never changed, but Harold caught something in his eyes, a moment of calculation, the same look he'd seen on the faces of operatives who thought they were smarter than everyone else. That look was very familiar to Harold. Chen and her team approached, curious about what Harold was doing. "Is there a problem?" Chen asked with a slightly mocking tone. She didn't like an old security guard slowing down the federal operation. Harold looked at the X-ray screen, then at the passenger, then back at Chen. "I need to manually inspect this bag." "The scanner shows nothing unusual," one of Chen's technicians said, somewhat impatiently. "We've been monitoring everything. Our equipment is state-of-the-art." Agent Roberts, 29, MIT graduate, had complete faith in the system. "We've been searching for hours. There's nothing on this guy." Harold didn't argue. He opened the bag and began systematically removing items: laptop, charger, documents, clothes. Everything was exactly as it appeared on the screen. Chen's team watched Harold, waiting with expressions of dwindling patience. "What's the old guy doing?" Roberts muttered. But then Harold did something the agents hadn't expected. He felt along the interior lining of the bag, running his fingers along the seams and corners. He had inspected thousands of bags over 30 years. He could identify every type of material under his fingertips. "What are you looking for?" Chen asked, now openly impatient. "Something that doesn't belong," Harold replied quietly. His fingers found it, a thin, flexible strip along the bottom edge of the bag. To the X-ray machine, it appeared to be part of the bag's frame. But Harold's trained touch detected the slight difference in density, the subtle irregularity that suggested it wasn't fabric or plastic. "This section feels different," he said, pointing to an area that looked identical to the rest of the bag. Chen called for a supervisor. At this point, the passenger was also beginning to show slight nervousness. His perfect mask was starting to crack. Within minutes, an explosive detection specialist arrived. Dr. Martinez, with 20 years of experience, examined the area Harold had indicated with a skeptical approach. When they carefully examined the area Harold had identified, they found it. A thin layer of explosive material, molded to match the bag's lining perfectly. Invisible to standard X-ray scanners, undetectable to most security protocols. powerful enough to kill hundreds of people when detonated on an aircraft. Dr. Martinez was shocked. "I've never seen this technique before. How did you detect it?" The passenger's confident smile completely disappeared. As federal agents moved to arrest him, he looked at Harold with a mixture of surprise and grudging respect. Agent Chen looked at Harold. The young agent was now looking with completely different eyes. "How did you know?" "Experience," Harold said simply. "I've seen this technique before." "Where?" Harold hesitated. "A long time ago, in a different context." As the suspect was led away, he turned to Harold. "Who are you, old man?" Harold didn't answer. Chen pulled Harold aside. "We need to talk. Your personnel file says you're just a security guard." "That's what I am now." "But what were you before?" Harold looked toward the departure gates where passengers continued their journeys, unaware of how close they'd come to tragedy. Someone who paid attention to details. That evening, Agent Chen made several phone calls. She searched for Harold Mitchell in federal databases. Within hours, she had Harold's complete military record. The file was classified, but Chen's clearance level was sufficient to read it. 30 years in Army intelligence, covert operations in West Berlin, dismantling terror cells in Lebanon, capturing war criminals in Bosnia, establishing intelligence networks in Afghanistan, commendations for preventing terrorist attacks, expert in explosive devices and threat assessment. At the end of his career, captain rank. The next morning, Chen was waiting for Harold at checkpoint B. "Harold Mitchell, former captain, Army intelligence. Why are you working as a security guard?" Harold continued setting up his station. His co-workers Marcus and Jessica were watching from a distance, sensing the morning's tension. "Because I need the job." "You could be training federal agents, consulting for the FBI, working with Homeland Security." "I tried that. They said I was too old, that my experience was outdated." Chen shook her head. "Yesterday you spotted something our most advanced equipment missed. That doesn't sound outdated to me." Harold smiled, a small, tired smile. "Technology is impressive, Agent Chen, but it can't replace human intuition, experience, the ability to recognize patterns that don't fit. Would you consider working with us? As a consultant?" Harold thought about his small apartment, his quiet routine, the years of feeling invisible despite everything he'd learned and done. "Let me ask you something, Agent Chen. How many former intelligence officers like me are there? Security guards, janitors, clerks, people with decades of experience who were pushed aside because the system thought they had nothing left to offer." Chen realized she didn't know the answer. "If you want my help," Harold continued, "it's not just about me. There are hundreds of us out there. Maybe it's time someone started paying attention." 3 months later, Harold was no longer working at Checkpoint B. Instead, he was leading a new FBI program called the Veteran Insight Initiative. The program identified and integrated former military intelligence personnel who had been overlooked by the system into the security sector. The program's first class consisted of 47 men and women, all over 50, all with decades of experience in recognizing threats that technology couldn't detect. Sarah, 54, former CIA analyst, now working as a grocery store cashier. Robert, 59, former bomb disposal expert, now working as a night watchman. Diana, 52, former NSA cryptographer, now working as a call center operator. On the wall of Harold's new office at the FBI field station, next to the old photograph of his unit, hung a letter from the Director of National Security, thanking him for preventing what could have been one of the deadliest terrorist attacks in recent history. But Harold was most proud of something else. The dozens of letters from former colleagues who had found new purpose, new recognition for the skills they thought the world no longer valued. Marcus and Jessica still work at Terminal 3. Now they know Harold's story. Marcus now calls him Captain Harold. Jessica's children treat him like their grandfather. The old soldier had taught them all an important lesson. True expertise doesn't fade with age. It just waits for someone wise enough to recognize its value. Have you ever faced a situation like this? Have your talents been underestimated because of your age or appearance? Share your experiences in the comments. See you in the next video.